Hey y'all, sometimes starting something new, like a dental assistant program, can be very overwhelming with all of this very new terminology that is extremely foreign to you. And so, this video is going to create a lot of the introductory terminology, not all, but a lot, so that it can help you with your studies and creating your flashcards. My name is Ruby Jones, your favorite dental diva. I have been a chairside assistant for nearly 15 years, so there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of mistakes that I have made along the way that I want you to avoid by following and listening to my video. So the basic terminology that you have to definitely understand from the beginning is going to be maxillary and mandibular. Okay, so when we are speaking maxillary or using the term maxillary, we are referencing everything in the patient's upper arch, upper teeth, up top. That is what the term maxillary means. And it's very helpful if the term that you're introduced to, or that you're trying to study, that you're trying to understand, make sure that if it does have a complete opposite, that you pretty much study it in pairs. Me being an instructor for so many years have found it very useful when I instruct my my students, that I introduce these terms if there is an opposite together, and it's very helpful when it comes to them making their flashcards and just studying. If it's a pair, it's much easier to do, much easier to remember, okay? So basically I'm saying that because the opposite of maxillary is going to be mandibular. So if we are talking about the lower teeth, the lower arch, we will want to use the term mandibular. Maxillary is upper, mandibular is going to be lower. Another key factor is just to make sure you start off understanding your patient is always looking at you. When their mouth is wide open, they are looking at you, which means when we use the terms left or right in sense of direction, we're always talking about the patient's left, the patient's right. It is never our left or our right. You sometimes can even kind of step behind the patient to figure out left or right, instead of facing them. If that helps you, you can do that as well. Say you're going to apply topical on a patient on tooth number 3, and you're like in your brain stuck. You don't want to apply it to their tooth number 15, which is the opposite of number 3. If you have to kind of stand behind them so they don't see you, for one, you don't want them to think you don't know your stuff. You can stand behind them and kind of count, okay, 1, 2, 3. All right, then you stand back in front of them and apply the topical in the patient's maxillary right quadrant where tooth number 3 is, okay? So left, always referring to the patient's left, right, always referring to the patient's right. So that is key. And another set of terms that I want to talk about in this video is posterior and anterior. Posterior is going to be back. Okay, so when we're referencing the back of the patient's mouth, the back surface, the back teeth, the teeth that are in the back, we are going to classify this as posterior teeth. Okay, so posterior means back. The opposite of that, the pair to that, is going to be anterior. Okay, so anterior is going to be the front teeth, the front of the mouth. Okay, and so in reference to specific teeth or a tooth, right, I like to make sure you understand, like, again, I used the tooth number 3 earlier, so I'm going to use it again. So tooth number 3 is either a posterior tooth or an anterior tooth. Okay, so every single tooth in our patient's mouth, in our mouth, is going to be either in the front or in the back. I just want to make sure you understand, like, tooth number 3 cannot be both. Tooth number 8 cannot be both. It is either or. it's either in the front or it's either in the back, and it's always going to be in the front or in the back. Okay, so the answer to that is tooth number 3 is a posterior tooth. It is the molar, the first molar that is located in the first quadrant in the patient's posterior back portion of the mouth. Okay, so posterior back, anterior front. Another term is going to be the midline or the central or the middle. Okay, so midline is dealing with symmetry, is going to go straight down in between the patient's teeth or face, really, and it happens to fall directly in between the patient's central incisors. Okay, so if you're talking tooth numbers, your midline is going to be in between 8 and 9, 24 and 25, dead in the center. Okay, so midline is referencing the middle, the center location. All right, so hopefully those terms that we covered today was helpful to you. Make sure that when you are creating your flashcards, you keep it very simple. Okay, so if you're creating your flashcard for maxillary, the back of your flashcard should say upper. Your flashcard for mandibular should say lower. Your flashcard for anterior should say front. Your flashcard for posterior should say back. Midline, your back of your flashcard that says midline should say center, middle, center. All of that really in terms means the same thing. Okay, so I hope that this video helped you. I'll continue to do videos like this about different terminology as the chapters, as you continue to study, and this is very helpful, not just for students that are fairly new or getting into the field, but also if you've been into the field, just to remember, because sometimes with talking to our patients, we lose touch of the actual literal official dental terms, and a great assistant is always going to be using those true terminology. Like, we're not going to talk to our doctor or to another assistant by saying back or front or up or down or lower. You want to practice using the correct terminology, such as maxillary, mandibular, anterior, posterior, even though we may not always use those terms with our patients. Okay, so hopefully you like this video. Hopefully you can like and take some notes, and it helps you with your flashcards as well. Until next time.